The air crackled with tension in the grand crystal chambers of the Sktheri Imperial Palace. Staff Sergeant Maya Reyes maintained her position 3 steps behind Ambassador Chen, exactly as protocol demanded. Her eyes methodically scanned the vast hall, taking in details that most humans would miss. The subtle shift in the Myricath delegates' spine ridges, the increasing temperature radiating from the Voldraxian contingent, the almost imperceptible color changes pulsing through the crystalline walls. 17 species from across the known galaxy gathered under the watchful gaze of Queen Empress HFY, whose multifaceted eyes reflected the light from a dozen different spectrums. Her exoskeleton gleamed with living crystal that hummed with barely contained telepathic energy. "The terms proposed by the Voldraxian hegemony are unacceptable," gurgled the Myricath ambassador, its translucent membranes flushing a dangerous shade of purple. "Their mining operations in the Cygnus sector have poisoned 3 of our aquatic colonies." Ambassador Chen shifted nervously beside Reyes. Humanity's first major diplomatic summit, and already disaster loomed. Earth had only joined the Galactic Concord II standard years ago, their invitation more a curiosity than respect for the young species. Most galactic powers viewed humans as physically inferior creatures with minimal technological advancement and no natural defenses. The Voldraxian representative rose to its full height, nearly 3 meters of volcanic skin and obsidian protrusions. Heat shimmered around its massive form as internal magma chambers superheated with emotion. "Your allegations are without evidence. The Myricath seek only to claim territories beyond their rightful domains." Ambassador Chen caught Reyes' eye, giving the subtle hand signal that meant, "Prepare for immediate withdrawal." Standard protocol when tensions escalated between major powers, the human delegation was to retreat to safer ground and avoid entanglement in conflicts beyond their influence. Palace security guards with gleaming exoskeletons rushed forward, their telepathic warnings filling the psychic space. Those species sensitive to such communications winced visibly. Queen Empress HFY, her crown of living crystal pulsing with alarmed light, rose from her ancient throne. That's when Reyes saw it, the almost imperceptible shift in the lead Voldraxian stance. Having studied xenobiology extensively during her specialized training, she recognized the positioning that preceded their devastating charge attack. The palace guards wouldn't react quickly enough. Without hesitation, Reyes broke formation. Her boots barely made a sound on the polished crystal floor as she sprinted past her shocked human colleagues, sliding into the space between the Voldraxian and Myricath delegations just as ceremonial weapons were drawn. Her standard-issue energy shield activated with a soft blue glow that seemed pathetically inadequate against the biological weapons of the aliens towering above her. The throne room fell into stunned silence. Queen HFY's multifaceted eyes widened, her telepathic surprise broadcasting unintentionally to every sensitive species in the chamber. No species in recorded galactic history had ever positioned themselves as peacekeepers in conflicts not their own, especially not a physically fragile species with no natural defenses. "Stand down," Reyes said, her voice steady despite the tension. The Concord Charter, Section 12, Paragraph 4, states that all territorial disputes must be settled through arbitration, not demonstration of force. The Voldraxian leader's magma chambers cooled slightly in confusion. The Myricath ambassador's poison spines retracted marginally. Neither species had expected resistance from a human, much less one quoting their own laws back to them. In the sudden stillness, Queen HFY's crystalline form caught the light, refracting it across the chamber in patterns that hadn't been seen in generations, the royal chromatic pattern of profound interest. The most powerful telepath in the galaxy stared in undisguised shock at the small human female standing between 2 apex predator species, with nothing but courage and a portable shield. Fascinating, the Queen's telepathic voice whispered in the minds of her closest advisors. "Perhaps we have misjudged these humans. Bring the human interloper before me." Queen Empress HFY's telepathic command reverberated through the palace corridors, causing several lesser species to wince in pain. Mayurais walked between two towering Sktheri royal guards, their crystalline exoskeletons catching the light in hypnotic patterns. She kept her posture military straight, refusing to show the anxiety churning in her stomach. The interrogation chamber gleamed with technology far beyond human understanding. Royal scientists with probing instruments stood ready, while military advisors positioned themselves strategically, hands never straying far from their weapons. "Your delegation has been confined to guest quarters," the Queen stated as she entered, her crown throwing rainbow patterns across Ray's face. "They will remain there until we determine your intentions." Ray's maintained a respectful expression. "My intentions were to prevent escalation, Your Majesty." The Queen circled her slowly, crystalline appendages clicking softly against the polished floor. "Your species possesses no natural armor, no venom, no telepathic defense. Yet you placed yourself between two apex predator species without hesitation. Explain this anomaly." Before Reyes could answer, the head royal scientist stepped forward with a device that hummed with energy. "Permission to conduct standard telepathic scan, Your Majesty." The Queen nodded, and Reyes felt a pressure behind her eyes as the device activated. The scientist's face contorted in confusion. "Unusual resistance, Your Majesty. Human brains appear naturally fragmented in ways our scanners struggle to interpret." "Primitive verbal questioning, then," the Queen declared with evident disappointment. For the next 2 hours, Reyes explained human concepts of de-escalation tactics, peacekeeping protocols, and diplomatic instinct. The Queen's personal advisor, ancient Lord Sindar, watched with growing alarm from the shadows as Reyes demonstrated her abilities. "This security recording," Reyes pointed to a holographic replay of the earlier confrontation, "shows the Voldraxian ambassador's magma chambers heating beyond diplomatic parameters 3 seconds before weapons were drawn. And here," she indicated a barely perceptible movement. The Myrketh delegate released pre-attack pheromones. The royal scientists exchanged troubled glances. These were details even their advanced scanners had categorized as insignificant background data. "You observed these signs without technological assistance?" the Queen asked, her exoskeleton shifting to a more attentive hue. "Standard human security training, Your Majesty. We rely on observing micro-expressions and body language because we lack telepathic abilities." Lord Sindar stepped forward, his ancient exoskeleton creaking slightly. "And what of the concealed disruptor in the Thracian delegate ceremonial guard? Did your training detect that as well?" Reyes blinked, momentarily surprised. "Third row, second seat from the left." "Yes, sir." The gravitational distortion created a slight ripple in their formal membrane. "I had flagged it in my security notes, but assessed it as defensive rather than offensive, given their historical vulnerability." The interrogation chamber fell silent. Reyes realized she had just identified a hidden weapon that no one had mentioned previously. Later that night, Queen Zixpa reclined in her private chambers, reviewing the interrogation recordings. A species that developed non-telepathic methods to detect deception and hidden threats, she mused to her closest advisor. "Imagine what such perception might notice in our own court." Lord Sindar's exoskeleton paled with concern. "Precisely why they must be contained, Your Majesty. This human's abilities threaten the established order off." "Or perhaps," the Queen interrupted, "they'd reveal weaknesses in an order that has grown complacent." In 3 separate corners of the palace, conspiracy took shape in whispered conversations. The Myrketh attaché exchanged coded messages with the Voldraxian second minister. The Guild of Ancient Species convened an emergency session behind quantum-sealed doors. The Thracian delegate, humiliated by the humans' casual revelation of their hidden weapon, contacted an assassin specializing in undetectable toxins, all with the same target: the dangerous new species that threatened millennia of established galactic hierarchy with their unusual abilities. "We invoke the right of Xatver." The Voldraxian ambassador's declaration sent gasps rippling through the assembled delegates. The morning session of the Concord negotiations had barely begun when the massive alien rose, magma chambers glowing ominously beneath his obsidian skin. Ambassador Chen paled visibly. "What is the right of HFY?" he whispered to his cultural advisor, who frantically paged through a datapad. Lord Sindar stepped forward from behind the Queen's throne. "The right of HFY is an ancient combat law, invoked when one party believes their honor has been impugned by interference in a legitimate dispute." The Voldrexian ambassador fixed his molten gaze directly on Reyes, who stood at attention behind the human delegation. The human who blocked rightful challenge must face Voldrexian champion in combat trial, or human species will lose all standing in Concord matters. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Ambassador Chen rose shakily to his feet. "The Earth delegation categorically rejects this Arctic demand, and will withdraw from these proceedings immediately rather than subject our personnel to." "I accept the challenge." All eyes turned to Reyes, who had stepped forward without waiting for her ambassador to finish. Chen's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally despair. "Sergeant Reyes, you cannot possibly." "With respect, sir," she said quietly, "withdrawal now would permanently brand humanity as cowards unwilling to stand by their actions." A ripple of alien laughter followed her declaration, quickly silenced by the Queen's raised crystalline appendage. "The human accepts," Queen Zixva announced, her multifaceted eyes studying Reyes with undisguised interest. "Combat will commence at first light. The Voldrexian hegemony may select their champion." The Voldrexian ambassador's magma chambers pulsed with satisfaction. "We select Guardian-class warrior Gorax, defender of the hegemony's outer colonies." Holographic images appeared above the chamber, showing a massive Voldrexian nearly 3 meters tall, with obsidian-hard skin plates and specialized acid glands. Combat footage displayed him defeating 3 different alien champions simultaneously. "May the cosmic forces honor your sacrifice, human," the Voldrexian ambassador said with what might have been genuine respect. Hours later, Reyes paced her quarters, reviewing schematics of Voldrexian physiology on her datapad. A soft chime announced a visitor at her door. A small service drone entered, its crystal components glittering. "Refreshments for honored combatant," it announced, placing a tray on her desk before departing. Beside the untouched food lay a data crystal that definitely hadn't been issued by her own delegation. Reyes hesitated only briefly before inserting it into her pad. Detailed Voldrexian biological data appeared, classified information about Gorax's specific weaknesses, training history, and combat patterns. The Queen's subtle assistance couldn't be more obvious. The question was, why? Reyes studied projections of her opponent late into the night. Voldrexians were devastating close combat specialists, with armored skin resistant to most conventional weapons and acid glands capable of melting standard armor in seconds. "Computer, display human versus Voldrexian physical comparison," she commanded. The results weren't encouraging. She was outmatched in every physical category by factors of 5 to 20. Straightforward combat was suicide. Sleep-deprived but clear-eyed, Reyes tested different movement patterns in her quarters, occasionally glancing at the small hologram of her daughter on her desk. Little Sophia's smile provided both comfort and purpose. This wasn't just about galactic politics anymore. It was about her daughter's future in a cosmos that would either respect humanity or dismiss them forever. By dawn, Reyes had accepted she couldn't match her opponent's strength. But humans had never relied on brute force to survive. They had always found another way. She just hoped the arena would give her enough space to demonstrate the true art of human warfare. The ancient combat arena filled to capacity, 17 species jostling for the best view of what many assumed would be a brief and bloody spectacle. Betting pools across the palace overwhelmingly favored the Voldrexian, with odds at 200 to 1 against the human. Reyes entered from the eastern gate, wearing only her standard uniform and carrying her basic energy shield. A murmur of disappointment rippled through the crowd at her lack of ceremonial armor or impressive weaponry. From the western gate emerged Gorax, the Voldrexian champion. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his obsidian battle armor gleamed in the morning light. Ceremonial acid throwers adorned his massive arms, and the ground trembled slightly with each step he took. Queen Zixpa observed from her royal viewing pod, Lord Sindar at her side. "How disappointing," he murmured. "I expected at least the pretense of proper combat preparation from the human." The Queen's multifaceted eyes narrowed. Perhaps preparation takes different forms among their kind. The ancient battle horn sounded, its resonance triggering ceremonial force fields around the arena perimeter. Gorax wasted no time, charging forward with devastating momentum, acid glands primed and ready. But when he reached Raya's position, she wasn't there. The human had sidestepped at the last possible moment, using minimum movement to maximum effect. The crowd's anticipated cheer died in confusion. What unfolded over the next 4 hours transcended combat into art form. Rise never directly engaged her opponent, using the arena's environmental features strategically. She led Gorax through terrain that cooled his magma chambers. She triggered ancient drainage systems with precisely timed jumps, creating slick surfaces that challenged his balance. Most importantly, she kept moving, never in panic, but in carefully plotted patterns that forced the massive Voldraxian to expend maximum energy for minimum gain. The crowd's initial mocking laughter transformed gradually. First came stunned silence, then reluctant appreciation, and finally open excitement as they witnessed a completely different approach to warfare. "She's using the arena itself as her weapon," Queen Zixpa observed, her exoskeleton flushing with colors of fascination, and his own strength against him. By the 3rd hour, Gorax's movements had slowed significantly. His internal temperature regulation was failing from sustained exertion, his acid glands depleted from too many missed attacks. "Finish the fight, human," he roared in frustration, his translator struggling with his overheated vocal organs. "Face me directly." "This is how humans fight," Rise called back, her voice steady despite her obvious fatigue. "We don't overcome strength with greater strength. We overcome it with strategy." The final phase came when Gorax, desperate and overheated, charged one last time. Rise led him toward the arena's central water feature, a decorative pool that most combatants avoided. With precise timing, she activated her shield's maximum power and deflected his charge directly into the pool. The rapid temperature change against his superheated system triggered an automatic shutdown response in the Voldraxian's biology. Gorax collapsed, his systems unable to regulate the thermal shock. The arena fell silent as Reyes approached her fallen opponent. Tradition demanded the victor deliver a ceremonial killing strike. She stood over him, victorious, then did the incomprehensible. She knelt down and checked his vital signs. Finding him stable but incapacitated, she offered him water from her own supply. "What is this?" he managed to ask, confusion evident even through his alien features. "In human combat," she explained, loud enough for nearby translation devices to broadcast to the stunned audience, "unnecessary death honors neither victor nor vanquished." In her private observation pod, Queen Zixpa's crystalline exoskeleton, flushed with colors that hadn't been seen in generations, the royal chromatic pattern of existential revelation. "If they fight wars with such restraint and strategic brilliance now," she whispered to her most trusted advisor, "what will they become in 1,000 years?" The royal summons arrived during the human delegation's victory celebration, carried by the Queen's personal chromatic herald, whose exoskeleton pulsed with the royal purple of a non-negotiable command. Ambassador Chen accepted the crystalline tablet with visible trepidation. Her Eternal Majesty Queen Empress Zixpa, the 14th, requests the permanent assignment of Staff Sergeant Maya Reyes to the Royal Security Detail as cultural advisor on defensive protocols. Silence fell over the celebration. Security Chief Ortega was the first to speak, her voice sharp with suspicion. "This is clearly a trap. They want to study human combat techniques to exploit our weaknesses." Political Officer Desai countered immediately. "Or it's an unprecedented opportunity for human influence at the highest level of galactic governance." Ambassador Chen raised his hand for silence as the delegation erupted into heated debate. The arguments continued for nearly an hour. Security risks versus diplomatic advantages. Personal sacrifice versus species advancement. Enough, Chen finally said, turning to Rice, who had remained quiet throughout. This decision affects your life most directly, Sergeant. The choice should be yours. Rice stared at the ornate summons. Her thoughts turned to Earth, to her daughter Sophia living with grandparents, while her mother served humanity's first diplomatic security detail. The original mission parameters had never included becoming alien royalty's personal guard. What happens if I decline? She asked the chromatic herald. The crystalline alien's colors shifted to a formal pattern. The Queen expects rejection. She has authorized me to inform you that humans standing within the Concord will not be affected by your personal decision. That was unexpected. Rice studied the herald's color patterns, recognizing sincerity in the ultraviolet spectrum that most humans couldn't perceive. I'll do it, she decided, understanding the historic importance of her position. That night, in her crystalline dream chamber, Queen Zixba experienced the third prophetic vision of her reign, a rare and terrible gift among her species. The dream vision showed two possible futures for the galaxy, one where humanity's charred homeworld orbited a dying star, another where human innovation had spread throughout the stars, reshaping every aspect of galactic civilization. When she awoke, her royal advisors found her exoskeleton pulsing with the deep blue of profound certainty. The human must be integrated into our highest circles, she declared. Our survival depends on it. Rice reported for her new duties the following morning, equipped with only her standard gear and a diplomatic translator. The Royal Guard captain, a towering Sktheri veteran named Kazanar, observed her with multifaceted eyes that made no effort to hide his skepticism. Your living quarters connect directly to the Queen's inner sanctuary, he explained, leading her through crystalline corridors that hummed with subtle energy. You will shadow the Queen during all public functions and security briefings. As they walked, Rice noticed how other species reacted to her presence, some with curiosity, others with poorly concealed hostility. The palace's labyrinthine politics made Earth's international tensions seem simplistic by comparison. Species who had hated each other for millennia exchanged pleasantries, while subtle shifts in posture or pheromone release signaled coup attempts invisible to most. Yet Rice, with her human capacity for recognizing patterns and deception without telepathic abilities, noticed what others missed. During her first official function, a resource allocation meeting between three ancient trading powers, she observed a serving drone moving with slightly irregular patterns. While the royal guards focused on the delegates, Rice positioned herself near the drone's projected path. When it suddenly accelerated toward the Queen, Rice intercepted it with practiced ease, disabling its concealed energy weapon before the royal guards had even registered the threat. The would-be assassination neutralized without violence or disruption to the proceedings, Rice resumed her position, as if nothing had occurred. Even Lord Sindar's skepticism wavered. Perhaps, he grudgingly admitted to the Queen afterward, there is something to these humans after all. The palace power grid failed during the Moonless Festival, when most guards participated in the sacred rituals. Emergency illumination bathed the royal quarters in ominous red light as Rice escorted the Queen from her meditation chamber. 3 weeks into her new assignment, and already Rice felt the rhythm of palace life, which made the timing of this power failure all the more suspicious. Deliberate sabotage, Rice said quietly, checking the corridor with her standard issue scanner. Multiple systems failed simultaneously. The Queen's exoskeleton shimmered with colors of concern. The festival leaves us with minimal security. Most telepathic guards are in deep communion. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, a betrayal from within. Myrketh assassins deployed sonic disruptors that shattered portions of the Queen's protective exoskeleton. At the same moment, Voldraxian heavy units blocked the main escape routes, their magma chambers glowing ominously in the emergency lighting. Rice reacted instantly. dragging the injured queen into her private chambers. Royal ichor leaked from multiple fractures in the monarch's crystalline form. "Your communication systems," Rise asked, barricading the ornate doors with furniture. "Blocked by quantum interference," the queen replied weakly. "A coordinated strike." The distinct sound of plasma cutters began to slice through the reinforced doors. Rise surveyed the room, mind racing as she processed what others would see as random luxury items. "Your Majesty, I need your jewelry, those curtain rods, the reflective pool chemicals, and any powdered medications you possess. Your species' defiance is futile but admirable," the queen telepathically communicated, her normally powerful broadcast reduced to a whisper. "The coordinated forces will breach within minutes." What followed astounded the queen, whose species evolved complex telepathy rather than innovative problem-solving. Rise transformed decorative items into defensive weaponry, created chemical barriers using cosmetic compounds, and fashioned primitive but effective traps from royal furnishings. When a Voldraxian breacher unit finally cut through the main doors, they encountered a series of defensive measures that no security protocol predicted. Rise had created acid neutralizers from bath salts, turned the queen's jewelry into refractive light traps that disoriented the attackers, and repurposed climate control elements to create blinding steam clouds. "How can you create solutions to problems you've never encountered?" the queen asked as they repelled the third wave of attackers. Her exoskeleton had grown dangerously pale, the equivalent of blood loss in human terms. Rise improvised a pressure bandage for the queen's fracturing crown using fabric and cosmetic adhesive. "Humans evolved without natural weapons or defenses," she explained, rigging the room's water purification system to create a scalding defensive perimeter. "Our only evolutionary advantage was our brain's ability to imagine solutions that don't yet exist." A Myrketh assassin broke through the secondary barrier, poisonous spines extended. Rise met the attack with a makeshift weapon fashioned from curtain rods and energized with power from her shield generator. The improvised electrical staff sent the amphibious attacker into convulsions. "You anticipated their biology would react this way?" the queen asked, watching the assassin collapse. "Educated guess," Rise replied, already reinforcing the next defensive position. Amphibious species typically have heightened sensitivity to electrical currents. Through 6 waves of increasingly desperate attacks, Rise adapted and innovated. When royal guards finally broke through to rescue them, they found 7 different species of would-be assassins incapacitated or trapped by completely unorthodox means. The queen's inner eyelids contracted in comprehension as she surveyed the scene from her medical stabilization unit. She finally grasped humanity's true power, not physical strength, but the ability to create solutions from seemingly nothing. A species without physiological advantages, but capable of turning any environment to their advantage through sheer creative problem-solving. She whispered to her most trusted advisor, "Might be more dangerous than any natural weapon evolution could provide." Lord Sindar, for once, had no counterargument. The Emergency Concord Assembly convened amid unprecedented security measures. Representatives from 17 galactic species filled the Grand Chamber, their discussions a cacophony of accusations and denials regarding the assassination attempt. Royal guards with newly modified security protocols flanked every entrance. Queen Zixva's entrance silenced the chamber. Her exoskeleton showed obvious repair lines, a shocking display of vulnerability for a species that considered physical perfection synonymous with leadership right. Staff Sergeant Reyes walked slightly behind her, now wearing a modified Royal Protector uniform that incorporated both Sktheri crystalline elements and human design principles. Rumors swirled through the delegation zones. Humans engineered the attack. Humans saved the Queen. Humans possessed secret weapons. Humans had telepathic powers they'd concealed. The Voldraxian and Myrketh delegations sat conspicuously separate from their usual alliance partners, their representatives unusually subdued. The assassination attempt has clarified what was previously obscured. The Queen's telepathic broadcast reached every mind in the assembly. Even Reyes could sense the unusual power behind this communication. The Queen was holding nothing back. "I have seen the inevitable path of our current trajectory, and it ends in destruction." Ancient species shifted uncomfortably. Lord Sindar stood at the Queen's right, his formal stance betraying nothing of his previous objections to human inclusion. "Many expected me to announce restrictions on the disruptive human presence following these events," the Queen continued. "Instead, I decree the formation of a new Concord security force with integrated leadership drawing from multiple species, with humans holding key positions." The chamber erupted in outrage. The Myerketh delegation rose as one, their membranous skin flushing with outrage colors. "The millennia of hierarchical dominance has brought us to the brink of collapse," the Queen declared over the chaos. "Our future security depends not on domination, but on integration of evolutionary strengths. We will secede from the Concord immediately," announced the Myerketh ambassador. 3 other ancient powers quickly echoed the threat. The Queen remained unmoved. "That is your right. But consider what you forfeit. The benefits of human innovation combined with Thracian spatial awareness, Voldraxian strength tempered by Sktheri foresight. Together, we are stronger than any single evolutionary path." In the diplomatic chaos that followed, the Queen drew Reyes into a private communication chamber. Away from the public spectacle, the monarch's exoskeleton dimmed with fatigue. "They will fight this change with everything they possess," she admitted, her telepathic voice carrying uncharacteristic emotional overtones. "Why take such a risk?" Reyes asked, still processing the magnitude of the Queen's pronouncement. "You've ruled successfully for centuries using traditional methods." The Queen's exoskeleton flushed with the deep blue of absolute certainty. "In my healing trance after the attack, I experienced not just dreams but predictive visions, thousands of possible futures for our galaxy." Her inner membranes fluttered in what Reyes now recognized as the equivalent of a troubled sigh. In every scenario where traditional power structures remain unchanged, civilization collapses within 3 generations. Only in futures where human adaptability and creative problem-solving integrate with established species strengths does peace sustain. She moved closer to Reyes, her crystalline form catching the light in hypnotic patterns. "Your species' greatest contribution isn't technology or resources. It's perspective. And if some species choose to leave the Concord," Reyes asked, "then they choose extinction," the Queen replied with the dispassionate clarity of one who has glimpsed the future. "The threats coming from beyond our galaxy will require all our combined strengths to survive." Reyes thought of her daughter back on Earth, of the future she might inherit, either as part of an integrated galactic community or as a target for species who feared human potential. "We'll need to start training immediately," she said. "Cross-species tactical units, integrated command structures. It's never been done before." The Queen's exoskeleton brightened slightly. "That, Sergeant Reyes, is precisely why we need humans to help design it." The sensor arrays at the galaxy's edge detected them first, massive void ships unlike any known design, tearing through the dimensional barrier from the neighboring Andromeda galaxy. 1 full cycle had passed since the formation of the integrated Concord Security Force, enough time for the radical experiment to either succeed spectacularly or fail catastrophically. Commander Maya Reyes stood on the bridge of the CSF Harmony, the newly commissioned flagship incorporating technologies from 12 different species. Her Royal Protector uniform had evolved into a commander's regalia that honored both her human heritage and her Sktheri appointment. The view screen showed the approaching invasion fleet, the Void Collective, a machine intelligence that had already consumed 3 galaxies according to ancient records. "Conventional analysis gives us a 12% survival probability," reported the Myerketh tactical officer, Admiral Shidduch, once a bitter opponent of human inclusion, now Reyes' most trusted advisor. His membranous skin rippled with concern patterns, but his voice remained steady. On the command deck, officers from species that once tried to assassinate each other now worked in synchronized harmony. Voldraxian weapons specialists, Sktheri telepathic navigators, human strategic coordinators, and 9 other species, each contributing their evolutionary specializations. Conventional analysis assumes conventional responses. Rise replied with the slight smile her alien colleagues had learned indicated confidence rather than dismissal. But there's nothing conventional about this fleet. The battle strategy they deployed came from 1,000 planning sessions that combined Voldraxian aggressive tactics with thorough long-term foresight and human adaptive problem-solving. Berserker pods carried Myreketh sonic disruptors modified with human-designed frequency modulators. Scatheri telepathic coordinators linked with human tactical officers to predict enemy movements seconds before they occurred. From her royal observation platform on the CSF Harmony, Queen Empress Zixpa watched with profound satisfaction. Her exoskeleton gleamed with the confidence of a monarch who had gambled everything on a radical vision and won. The integration exceeds even my most optimistic projections, she communicated to Lord Sindar, who had finally embraced his role as liaison between the old guard and the new integrated forces. As the battle unfolded, the machine intelligence of the Void Collective encountered something it had never faced in 3 galaxies of conquest: unpredictability. Its computational models failed against the combined intuitive leaps of multiple biological intelligences working in concert. When the final Void ship retreated back through the dimensional tear, the combined Concord fleet had suffered losses but remained intact. Victory celebrations erupted across 17 worlds, including 4 species that had initially threatened secession, but returned to the Concord when the external threat materialized. On the flagship bridge, Commander Reyes gazed out at the stars, thinking of her daughter, who now studied at the first multi-species academy on Earth. Sophia's latest message had been filled with excitement about her Voldraxian chemistry instructor and Myreketh biology professor. Queen Zixpa joined Reyes at the observation window, her crystalline form catching the light of distant stars. "Your mind seems elsewhere, Commander," she observed. "I was thinking about how much has changed," Reyes replied. "When I stepped between those delegates 4 years ago, I never imagined it would lead to this." The Queen's exoskeleton shimmered with colors of profound satisfaction. Small actions can alter the course of history when they demonstrate a truth others have forgotten. Together they watched as the integrated fleet formed up for the journey home. "Humanity never conquered the galaxy as so many feared we might," Reyes observed quietly. "You did something far more revolutionary," the Queen replied. "You helped create a civilization where conquest itself became obsolete." As the flagship engaged its drive systems, Reyes reflected on the long journey from that moment when a human guard stepped forward and an alien queen stared in shock. The galaxy had transformed, not through dominance of any single species, but through the recognition that true strength came from embracing diversity rather than fearing it. In that simple truth lay humanity's greatest gift to the stars.